So, what can we learn from the paradox of thrift? First, it teaches us to think critically about the relationship between individual choices and collective outcomes. It shows that actions that seem responsible on a personal level can have unintended consequences when scaled up. Second, it highlights the importance of balance. Saving and spending are both essential, but their impact depends on timing and context. And finally, it underscores the interconnectedness of an economy. No one acts in isolation. Our decisions affect others, and their decisions affect us. In a world that often celebrates individual responsibility, the paradox of thrift challenges us to think collectively. It reminds us that the health of an economy depends not just on what we do for ourselves, but on how we contribute to the broader system. And perhaps most importantly, it shows us that economics isn't just about dollars and cents. It's about the choices we make and the values we share as a society. So the next time you're deciding whether to save or spend, remember, it's not just a personal decision. It's part of a much larger story. And that's what makes the paradox of thrift so thought-provoking. It forces us to see the bigger picture, to think beyond ourselves, and to navigate the delicate balance between individual and collective well-being. The paradox of thrift is a fascinating economic concept that challenges our conventional wisdom about saving and spending. Imagine being told that saving your money, a habit you've always thought was responsible and wise, could actually harm the economy. How is that possible? This paradox reveals a striking contradiction. What's good for an individual may not always be good for society as a whole. It forces us to rethink the balance between saving and spending, especially during times of economic uncertainty. The paradox begins with a simple, common-sense principle. Saving is good. When you save, you're setting money aside for the future, building financial security, and ensuring you can weather unexpected expenses. But in an economy, saving doesn't happen in isolation. Your decision to save means spending less, and spending less affects the businesses and workers who depend on consumer demand. The paradox of thrift suggests that when everyone saves at the same time, it can lead to unintended consequences that ripple through the entire economy. Let's break it down. Imagine a small town where everyone suddenly decides to save more money. People stop eating out, shopping for clothes, and taking vacations. At first, this might seem like a good idea. Families are being cautious and preparing for the future. But as spending decreases, local businesses see fewer customers. Restaurants, shops, and travel agencies begin to struggle. They cut back on hiring, lay off workers, or even close their doors. With fewer jobs and less income, people have even less money to spend. The cycle feeds on itself, dragging the economy down further. This is the heart of the paradox of thrift. What's rational and beneficial for one person, saving, can become harmful when everyone does it at once. It's a classic example of what economists call the asterisk fallacy of composition asterisk, where what's true for the individual isn't necessarily true for the group. While saving money might help you personally, if everyone tightens their belts simultaneously, the overall economy suffers. The paradox was popularized by British economist John Maynard Keynes during the Great Depression. Keynes argued that in times of economic downturn, the collective urge to save could make things worse. When demand falls, businesses cut production, unemployment rises, and the economy spirals downward. In these situations, Keynes suggested that what the economy needs isn't more saving, it's more spending. By spending money, people create demand, which drives production, creates jobs, and stimulates growth. But the paradox of thrift doesn't mean saving is always bad. In a healthy economy, saving plays an important role in fueling long-term growth. Savings become investments, funding businesses, infrastructure projects, and innovation. The paradox applies specifically to periods of economic contraction, when a sudden increase in saving can exacerbate a recession. It's a reminder that the impact of saving depends on the broader economic context. The paradox also raises important questions about the role of government in managing the economy. If individuals and businesses are cutting back during a recession, who can step in to keep demand alive? Keynes argued that this is where governments come in. Through public spending on projects like infrastructure, education, or healthcare, governments can inject money into the economy, create jobs, and stimulate demand. This idea forms the basis of Keynesian economics, which has shaped how many countries respond to economic crises. Critics of the paradox of thrift argue that it oversimplifies the complexities of an economy. Some believe that saving, even during a downturn, is ultimately beneficial because it leads to investment and future growth. Others worry that encouraging spending during a recession can lead to excessive debt, both for individuals and governments. These debates highlight the tension between short-term solutions and long-term stability, a challenge that policymakers face in every economic crisis. The paradox of thrift also has a psychological dimension. In uncertain times, fear and anxiety drive people to save more, creating a self-reinforcing cycle. This is why consumer confidence plays such a critical role in economic health. When people feel optimistic about the future, they're more likely to spend, fueling growth. When fear takes over, the economy contracts. The paradox reminds us that economics isn't just about numbers. It's about human behavior and the emotions that drive our decisions. On a more philosophical level, the value paradox invites us to reflect on the things we truly value in life. Do we prize the essential but often invisible resources like water, air, and community? Or do we chase the rare and glamorous like diamonds and status symbols at the expense of what really sustains us? It's a question that goes beyond economics, touching on our priorities as individuals and societies. Ultimately, the value paradox is more than a quirky economic puzzle. It's a lens through which we can explore the complexity of human choices, the intricacies of markets, and the values that shape our world. It teaches us that value is never absolute. It's always contextual, dynamic, and deeply tied to how we see ourselves and our place in the world. And perhaps that's the paradox's greatest lesson. What we value says as much about us as it does about the things we value. The value paradox, also known as the diamond water paradox, poses a fascinating question. Why is water, which is essential for life, so cheap, while diamonds, which have no real survival value, so expensive? This paradox, first articulated by Adam Smith, the father of modern economics, challenges our understanding of worth, utility, and the things we value in life. It reveals surprising truths about human decision-making and the nature of value. To understand the value paradox, let's start with the basics. Water is vital. We need it to drink, grow food, clean, and survive. Without water, life as we know it would end. Diamonds, on the other hand, are essentially luxury items. They're used for adornment, industrial tools, and symbolic gestures like engagement rings. But you could live your entire life without ever needing a diamond. So why is it that water, which is essential, is often free or costs very little, while diamonds, which are non-essential, are staggeringly expensive? The paradox lies in the difference between two types of value: asterisk utility value asterisk and asterisk exchange value asterisk. Utility value refers to the usefulness of something, its ability to satisfy a need or want. Water has enormous utility because it's indispensable for life. Exchange value, on the other hand, refers to what something can be traded for in a market. This is where the paradox emerges. Water has high utility but low exchange value, while diamonds have low utility but high exchange value. The resolution to this paradox lies in the concept of asterisk marginal utility asterisk, which explains how value is influenced by scarcity and context. Marginal utility is the additional satisfaction or benefit you get from consuming one more unit of something. Think of it this way. If you're stranded in the desert, dying of thirst, a glass of water would be priceless. It could save your life. But if you're at home with unlimited access to clean water, an extra glass has little value because your basic needs are already met. The value of water depends not just on its overall importance, but on how much of it you already have. Diamonds, in contrast, are rare. Their scarcity means that each individual diamond has a high marginal utility. Because they're not easily available, people are willing to pay a premium for them, even though they don't have the life-saving utility of water. The value paradox shows us that value isn't just about necessity, it's about context, availability, and perception. This paradox has profound implications for economics and human behavior. It reveals how markets operate not on absolute value, but on relative value. People don't pay for how important something is in an abstract sense. They pay for how much it's worth to them in the moment, given their needs and circumstances. This is why luxury goods, which are scarce and desirable, command high prices, even if they have little practical use. The value paradox also challenges us to think critically about the things we prioritize and pursue. It reminds us that value is often subjective, shaped by culture, society, and individual preferences. What one person sees as valuable, another might see as unnecessary. Diamonds, for example, are prized in many cultures as symbols of love, status, and wealth. But their value is largely a social construct. Water, on the other hand, is often taken for granted because of its abundance, even though it's the foundation of life itself. In modern economics, the value paradox has been resolved through the theories of supply and demand. Water is cheap because it's abundant and easy to access in most parts of the world. Diamonds are expensive because they're scarce and difficult to mine, refine, and bring to market. The interplay between supply, demand, and marginal utility creates the price differences we observe. But this resolution doesn't diminish the paradox, it deepens it. It forces us to recognize how easily scarcity and perception can distort our understanding of worth. The value paradox also holds lessons for how we think about the broader economy and global issues. Consider water again. While it may be inexpensive in places with abundant access, in drought-stricken regions or areas with poor infrastructure, clean water can become a highly valuable and even unaffordable resource. The paradox reminds us of the fragility of abundance and the importance of managing resources wisely. In the end, the paradox of choice isn't just about ice cream flavors or streaming platforms. It's a reflection of how we navigate the complexity of modern life. It challenges us to rethink our assumptions about freedom and happiness, and to recognize that sometimes less really is more. By understanding this paradox, we can make better decisions, find greater peace of mind, and ultimately live more fulfilling lives. The paradox of choice is a fascinating concept that challenges the common assumption that more options always lead to greater freedom and happiness. Imagine walking into an ice cream shop, craving something sweet, only to be faced with 50 flavors instead of the usual 5 or 6. At first, the abundance of choices seems exciting: chocolate, vanilla, pistachio, salted caramel, mango sorbet, rocky road, and so many more. But as you try to decide, the excitement turns into overwhelm. What if you choose pistachio but miss out on salted caramel? What if rocky road would have been perfect? Suddenly, what should have been a simple, joyful decision becomes a stressful and exhausting ordeal. This is the paradox of choice. The idea that while more choices may seem better, they can actually make us less happy, more anxious, and ultimately less satisfied with our decisions. Popularized by psychologist Barry Schwartz, the paradox of choice highlights how an overwhelming number of options can paralyze us. When faced with too many choices, we often struggle to make a decision at all. Think about how many times you've scrolled through a streaming platform, unable to pick a movie, only to end up rewatching something familiar. The more options we have, the harder it becomes to decide, as each choice carries the fear of missing out on something better. But the paradox doesn't stop at indecision. It also affects how satisfied we feel after making a choice. Let's go back to the ice cream shop. You finally settle on salted caramel, but as you eat it, you can't help but wonder if pistachio would have been better. Even if the salted caramel is delicious, your enjoyment is diminished by the nagging thought of what you might have missed. This phenomenon is known as post-decision regret, and it's one of the key ways the paradox of choice undermines our happiness. One reason this happens is due to opportunity cost. Every time we make a choice, we're also choosing not to do something else. When there are only a few options, the opportunity cost feels small. But when there are dozens or even hundreds of possibilities, the cost of what we didn't choose feels enormous. We become hyper-aware of the alternatives we gave up, which makes it harder to fully enjoy the option we picked. Another factor at play is our own expectations. The more options we have, the higher our expectations become. If you only have 3 ice cream flavors to choose from, you might be perfectly happy with what you get. But when there are 50 flavors, you expect the perfect one, the flavor that will blow your mind. And if the salted caramel doesn't deliver that impossible level of satisfaction, you feel disappointed, not because it wasn't good, but because it wasn't perfect. The paradox of choice shows us that more options don't just give us more freedom, they also give us more room for disappointment. Interestingly, the paradox of choice doesn't affect everyone in the same way. Some people, known as asterisk maximizers asterisk, feel compelled to find the absolute best option in any situation. Maximizers are the ones who read hundreds of reviews before buying a phone or spend hours researching restaurants before picking a place to eat. While this thoroughness might seem like a good thing, it often leads to stress and dissatisfaction because maximizers are constantly worrying about whether they made the right choice. On the other hand, satisficers are people who aim for good enough. They make decisions quickly and don't obsess over what they might have missed, which often makes them happier and more relaxed. The paradox of choice has profound implications for how we live our lives. In today's world, we're bombarded with options: what to eat, what to wear, what to watch, where to live, who to date, what career to pursue. On the surface, this abundance of choice seems empowering, but in reality, it can lead to decision fatigue, a state where the sheer effort of choosing leaves us drained and less capable of making good decisions. So, how do we navigate the paradox of choice? One solution is to embrace the idea of good enough. Instead of obsessing over finding the perfect option, we can learn to appreciate the choices we make and let go of what we didn't choose. Another strategy is to set limits on the number of options we consider. For example, instead of endlessly scrolling through a streaming platform, we could pick from the first 5 movies we see. By simplifying our decision-making process, we reduce stress and increase satisfaction. The paradox of choice also teaches us a deeper lesson about happiness. True happiness doesn't come from having unlimited options. It comes from being present and content with the choices we make. It reminds us that freedom isn't about having endless possibilities. It's about having the clarity and confidence to choose without regret. Paradox? First, it teaches us that tolerance has limits, and those limits are necessary to preserve the values we hold dear. Second, it challenges us to think critically about how we respond to intolerance, whether through open dialogue, legal protections, or in extreme cases, restrictions. Finally, it reminds us that a tolerant society is not a passive one. It requires vigilance, courage, and a willingness to confront difficult questions about freedom, fairness, and justice. The tolerance paradox isn't just a problem to be solved. It's a reflection of the complexities of living in a diverse and open society. It forces us to grapple with the tension between our ideals and the realities of human behavior. And perhaps its greatest lesson is that tolerance, like freedom, requires constant effort and care to sustain. The tolerance paradox, first introduced by philosopher Karl Popper, presents a profound and troubling dilemma that challenges the very foundation of what it means to live in an open and free society. At its core lies a simple yet uncomfortable question. Asterisk. How far should a tolerant society go in accepting opposing viewpoints, especially when those viewpoints threaten the very principles of tolerance itself? Imagine a society built on the principle of tolerance, where people are free to express their beliefs, live as they choose, and engage in open dialogue. But then, an intolerant ideology begins to emerge, one that rejects the values of tolerance and actively works to suppress the freedoms of others. What should the tolerant society do? If it tolerates the intolerant, it risks being overrun by those who reject tolerance altogether. But if it doesn't tolerate the intolerant, hasn't it abandoned its own principle of tolerance? This is the heart of the paradox. Tolerance is often seen as an absolute good, but the tolerance paradox reveals its limits. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that tolerance, when taken to an extreme, can become self-destructive. Popper introduced this idea in his 1945 book, *The Open Society and Its Enemies*. He argued that unlimited tolerance can lead to the erosion of tolerance itself. If a society allows intolerant ideologies to take root and spread unchecked, those ideologies can eventually undermine the very freedoms that made the society tolerant in the first place. Popper's solution was clear but controversial. Asterisk, a tolerant society must reserve the right to be intolerant toward intolerance. On the surface, this might sound contradictory. How can a society committed to tolerance justify being intolerant? But Popper's argument isn't about suppressing disagreement or silencing opposing viewpoints. It's about drawing a line when those viewpoints actively threaten the rights and safety of others. The goal isn't to eliminate conflict or disagreement, but to protect the conditions that make a tolerant society possible. The tolerance paradox isn't just a philosophical puzzle. It has real-world implications. Consider freedom of speech, one of the cornerstones of a tolerant society. Should this freedom extend to those who use it to spread hate speech, incite violence, or advocate for the suppression of others' freedoms? Some argue that even the most offensive ideas should be allowed in the name of free expression, trusting that open debate will expose and discredit harmful views. Others contend that allowing such speech can create an environment where intolerance thrives, ultimately putting vulnerable groups at risk. History offers numerous examples where the tolerance paradox has played out in dramatic ways. In the early 20th century, many democratic nations tolerated the rise of authoritarian movements, believing they could coexist with democratic values. But in cases like Nazi Germany, that tolerance allowed intolerant ideologies to gain power and dismantle democracy from within. These historical lessons show that unchecked tolerance can have devastating consequences. But where should we draw the line? This is where the tolerance paradox becomes especially tricky. Not all forms of intolerance are equally dangerous, and not all disagreements threaten the fabric of society. Disagreeing with someone's political views or cultural practices isn't the same as advocating for their suppression. The challenge lies in distinguishing between harmful intolerance that needs to be addressed and healthy conflict that should be encouraged. Critics of Popper's idea often raise concerns about who gets to decide what counts as intolerant. They argue that labeling certain ideas or groups as intolerant can be subjective and prone to abuse. A government or group in power could misuse this principle to silence dissent under the guise of protecting tolerance. This highlights the delicate balance a society must strike between protecting itself and avoiding authoritarianism. The tolerance paradox also raises important questions about human psychology and group dynamics. Intolerance often arises from fear, ignorance, or a sense of threat. Addressing these underlying causes through education, dialogue, and empathy can be more effective than simply suppressing intolerant ideas. But even these approaches have limits, especially when dealing with ideologies that are fundamentally opposed to dialogue or compromise. In today's polarized world, the tolerance paradox feels more relevant than ever. Debates over free speech, censorship, and the boundaries of tolerance play out daily, from social media platforms to political arenas. As we navigate these challenges, the paradox reminds us that tolerance isn't just about accepting differences. It's about actively protecting the principles that make coexistence possible. So, what can we learn from the tolerance paradox? First, it teaches us that tolerance, The friendship paradox is a fascinating phenomenon that reveals how our social networks shape our perceptions. On average, your friends tend to have more friends than you do, and this isn't just a feeling, it's a mathematical reality. But how does this happen, and what does it tell us about the way we connect, interact, and compare ourselves to others? To understand the paradox, let's break it down mathematically. Imagine a social network as a web of connections linking people together. Some individuals have only a few friends, while others are social butterflies with dozens or even hundreds of connections. The paradox arises because people with many friends are more likely to be your asterisk friends. Think of it this way. Someone with 100 friends has 100 chances to be connected to you, while someone with only 2 friends has just 2 chances. In a network, these highly connected individuals act as hubs, skewing the average number of friends your friends have. This means when you compare yourself to your friends, you're more likely to be comparing yourself to someone with above average popularity. As a result, your friends, on average, will seem more connected than you are. But the friendship paradox isn't just about numbers. It has deeper psychological and social implications, especially in the age of social media. When we scroll through platforms like Instagram or Facebook, we're often exposed to the highlights of other people's lives. Vacations, parties, and achievements shared by our most connected friends. This creates the illusion that everyone else is more popular, successful, or interesting than we are. The friendship paradox explains why this illusion is so pervasive. We're naturally more exposed to the lives of the most connected individuals, amplifying feelings of comparison. This can have significant effects on mental health, as social comparison is a key driver of anxiety, envy, and even depression. The paradox reminds us that these comparisons are often based on a distorted perspective. Your friends might seem more connected, but that's largely due to how networks function, not because you're less valuable or less connected yourself. Interestingly, the friendship paradox isn't just a curiosity, it has practical applications. In public health, for example, it's used to identify influential individuals in social networks during disease outbreaks. Health officials might target vaccination campaigns or public health messages to highly connected individuals, as they're more likely to influence others. By leveraging the paradox, we can improve the spread of helpful information and curb the spread of harmful misinformation or diseases. The paradox also sheds light on the dynamics of influence and inequality in networks. In any network, whether it's a group of friends, a professional community, or a social media platform, connections aren't distributed evenly. A small number of individuals often hold a disproportionate amount of influence. The friendship paradox reveals how this inequality shapes our perceptions, interactions, and even opportunities. Perhaps the most profound lesson of the friendship paradox is what it teaches us about perspective. It reminds us that our view of the world is always partial, shaped by the connections and relationships we have. Just as your friends seem more popular, your perception of other aspects of life, success, happiness, or wealth, might be skewed by the people you're exposed to. The paradox invites us to question these perceptions, recognize their limitations, and focus on what truly matters. Ultimately, the friendship paradox isn't just about numbers. It's about understanding how we relate to others and how networks influence our lives. It challenges us to rethink the way we compare ourselves to others, to see beyond the surface of popularity, and to appreciate the unique connections we have. Because in the end, it's not about how many friends you have. It's about the depth, meaning, and quality of those relationships. And no paradox can take that away from you. Imagine this. You're standing at the edge of a river, your heart racing, your breath shallow. Your child has just been snatched by a crocodile. The beast stares at you with cold, unblinking eyes and says, "I will return your child, if and only if you can correctly guess what I will do next." Your mind freezes. This isn't just a life or death situation, it's a logical trap. No matter what you say, you're stepping into a paradox. Welcome to the crocodile paradox, a puzzle that has baffled philosophers for centuries. It's not just about a predator and its prey. It's a profound exploration of logic, promises, and the limits of certainty. Let's dive into this mind-bending dilemma and unravel its secrets. You have two possible answers to give the crocodile. Let's consider the first scenario. You predict that the crocodile will return your child. If the crocodile plans to return your child, your prediction is correct, and the crocodile fulfills its promise. Everything aligns, and your child is safe. But if the crocodile plans to keep your child, your prediction is wrong, and the crocodile isn't bound to return the child. In this scenario, everything remains logically consistent because the outcome depends entirely on whether your prediction aligns with the crocodile's intention. The real paradox emerges in the second scenario. Here, you predict that the crocodile will not return your child. If the crocodile plans to keep the child, your prediction is correct. But now the crocodile is forced to return the child because your prediction was accurate. This creates a contradiction because the crocodile cannot both keep the child and honor its promise to return them when your prediction is correct. On the other hand, if the crocodile plans to return the child, your prediction is wrong, and by the terms of the deal, the crocodile should not have returned the child in the first place. In either case, the crocodile is trapped in a logical contradiction. So, what's really going on here? The crocodile paradox is a classic example of a self-referential paradox, where a statement refers to itself in a way that creates an impossible situation. It's similar to the famous liar's paradox, where someone says, "This statement is false. If the statement is true, then it must be false, but if it's false, then it must be true." The crocodile paradox operates on the same slippery logic, where the crocodile's promise collapses under its own weight. But beyond the logical puzzle, the crocodile paradox also raises deeper philosophical questions. At its core, it's about the nature of promises, truth, and trust. If a promise creates a scenario where it cannot logically be kept, is it really a promise at all? And if a situation is built on contradictory rules, can any outcome truly be fair or just? In a way, the paradox reflects real-world situations where agreements are made under flawed premises. Think about legal contracts filled with loopholes, political promises built on conflicting conditions, or even personal dilemmas where every choice seems to backfire. The crocodile paradox isn't just a brain teaser. It's a mirror reflecting the complexity and imperfection of the promises we make and the expectations we set. But let's not forget the crocodile in this story. The paradox also reveals something about power and control. The crocodile isn't just a passive participant in this riddle, it's the architect of the trap. By setting the rules in a way that guarantees contradiction, the crocodile ensures that no answer can fully satisfy the agreement. In a sense, it represents authority structures or systems where the rules are intentionally rigged to maintain control, even in the face of logic and fairness. So, can this paradox ever be solved? Philosophers have debated this question for centuries, and the general consensus is no. The paradox isn't meant to have a resolution because it's not about finding an answer. It's about understanding the problem. It's a thought experiment designed to expose the limits of language, logic, and our assumptions about fairness and promises. But perhaps the real lesson of the crocodile paradox is this: not every question has an answer. Not every problem can be untangled through pure reasoning. And sometimes the power lies not in solving the puzzle, but in recognizing the trap it creates. So, if you ever find yourself face to face with a crocodile offering a deal that seems impossible to fulfill, remember this paradox. Sometimes the game is rigged from the start, and the only winning move is to recognize the paradox for what it is: a cleverly constructed trap hiding behind the illusion of choice.